Today we're going to be interviewing a very special guest, Dr. Howard Hart, PhD, who's had an amazing career. We talked a little bit before the interview for preparation purposes. And Howard, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Howard, you worked at R&D, or the GE Research and Development Center, which is called by other names since 1960. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
And how many years did you work there?
Oh, about 35 years before I retired, and then I consulted for another 10 years.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get involved in physics and technical education when you were a young man? What sort of sparked you to pursue that field?
Well, I enjoyed my science courses, and I had a very good physics and chemistry teacher.
Where was that?
This was down in Rome, Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little school outside of town there. So I think I knew all along that I was going to be interested in science or engineering, and never changed.
So where did you go to college and do your graduate work?
Well, I got my undergraduate work was at Cornell University, where I got a degree in engineering physics, and then after working a couple of years, I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois, where I got my PhD in very low temperature physics using nuclear magnetic resonance.
And you're married?
I'm married and have 3 daughters.
3 daughters.
And 5 grandchildren.
And you still live in this area in Schenectady County, is that true?
That's right. We have lived in Schenectady County since 1960.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you worked on superconductors and worked with some very famous people starting in 1960 or so. The name Ivar Giaever comes up.
Right.
What was your relationship with Ivar Giaever, and professionally and personally?
Well, I was hired into a very good group with very good people, and Ivar was one of them. And Ivar had already seen the effect that he was going to get his Nobel Prize for, but he really needed to go down to yet lower temperatures in order to make the effect technically very good. And I was building a refrigerator that would take you to these very much lower temperatures, and so we started working together. And that was very fruitful and a great way to begin.
So what was the accomplishment in that study on the refrigerators? What was the goal, and what happened? What were you trying to accomplish?
Well, Ivar had discovered a way of seeing what was really going on in a superconductor. This is not making magnets or anything like that, but this is really understanding the underlying physics. And you're somewhat limited in what you can see by the thermal agitation, the vibrations, if you wish, that happen. And as you go to lower and lower temperatures, those die down, 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 so that you can see the effects that you're trying to measure much better. And he had all the right ideas, and he demonstrated the effect, but we needed to do it at lower temperatures so that we could make it a better scientific tool. And we did.
I see. How many people worked in the group with you?
Well, it's Ivar. It's Ivar, but there were a fellow named Carl Rosner was sort of working as a technical assistant, and then I came in with the low temperatures. So there were 3 of us, I would say. But there's a name I should mention. That's Charles Bean, who's now deceased.
Yes.
But he was just a wonderful mentor and enthusiastic person to keep you going and make you enjoy what you're doing, and help you realize how important it was.
I had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Bean, and his wife Betty Bean was a leader in the community and the county legislature, a wonderful lady who was also passed, rest her soul.
Right.
Ivar Giaever won the Nobel Prize.
That's true.
So you worked with some significant people.
I did.
He's one, but there are others that we're going to talk about. You met other notables in the metallurgy field also, didn't you? At R&D, was there a metallurgy lab, or what was the environment like, the working environment?
Well, there was a fellow named Herbert Holloman who'd set up a very forward-looking metallurgical lab. In fact, I worked in what was called the physical metallurgy section under Roland Schmidt. However, here we were working on the fundamentals of superconductivity in the physical metallurgy lab, so you don't pay too much attention to what the names really say. And yes, it turned out that during this time, the people at Bell Labs discovered a high-field superconductor, which gave us the idea that you might make a very high-field magnet. And then some other people, some of whom we know of in the community already, a fellow named Mark Benz, who was a metallurgist, and Carl Rosner, who was an electrical engineer by training, but who has come on to be a community and an industrial leader, and Paul Swartz. So there were a group of us, and actually it was a much larger group, but these are the people who worked very hard to try to learn to make these superconducting magnets with very high magnetic fields, and we succeeded.
You succeeded. What was the goal? What was the standard that you exceeded or met?
Well, in those days, if you had iron, you could make a magnet that would make maybe 20 or 30,000 Gauss. But with the superconductor, we felt we could make 100,000 Gauss. And that would really be quite an advance. We did do that. That was our goal, and we reached it.
Howard, in the 1960s, you transitioned to other areas of study, and you worked on the Apollo projects, which is very exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences and the type of things you did on the Apollo projects?
Well, yes. So there was within the same group, there were 3 fellows at the lab who developed a new way of detecting high-energy charged particles, and we don't need to talk about how they did that. But they were interested in such things as cosmic rays, and became involved in the Apollo program. And actually, through high magnetic fields, I ended up working with them. That's a complicated story, but we received first lunar soils and then lunar rocks, and we looked at the cosmic ray exposures and the stirring up of the moon's surface by making studies on those. And then we actually also put some experiments. We had one on Apollo 16 and one on Apollo 17 that we actually built, GE built, and we put them up there. We also did some work. The Surveyor had been put up there and had been there a couple of years when Apollo 12 landed at the same spot. And we did some studies, cosmic ray studies again, on some of the parts from the Surveyor.
So what were the goal of the studies? Was it resistance or durability?
No.
What were you actually
We were trying to
looking
find,
for?
mostly what we were trying to find out was how many cosmic rays came from the sun,
Mm-hmm.
what elements they were, and how energetic they were. And we made measurements of that. This was essentially geoscience. And we made these measurements and we published them in the literature. All GE got out of this was publicity. And it's interesting that looking back now, it's hard to believe that that was important. I actually ended up a picture of me working with an Apollo helmet in one of the GE quarterly reports, which you wouldn't see now.
I hope you still have that picture.
Oh, yes.
Good.
It's about...
That's great. I remember meeting Jack Swigert at the 109th Air National
yes.
Guard. He landed here in Schenectady, astronaut. You also worked, I was told, I mean, you could tell me, on biological effects on the astronauts themselves. Is that air quality, or what was that all about?
How did you do that?
Well, I have my ways.
Okay. Well, this is now a particular fellow named Bob Fleischer, but he went to a meeting down in Houston and found out that the helmets that the astronauts were wearing was made out of Lexan. They were made out of Lexan. And Lexan was one of our star performers in terms of being particle detectors. And so we got the helmets, and we actually etched out, we made these tracks visible in the helmets. And one time Bob Fleischer was down giving a lecture to the astronauts, and he showed them this, where you could see exactly where these particles had come in and gone out. He said, now we know what's going through the head of the astronauts. And they didn't think that was very funny.
Well, it is. I hope they gave you a souvenir helmet with your name on it on that project.
No, but...
it would have been nice.
Yes, that would have been nice. No, they ended up in the Smithsonian.
Guy Suits is a famous name at R&D. Did you work at R&D while Guy Suits was in charge?
Yes, he was in charge when I went to work there, and I didn't have many interactions with him. He was way up there, and I was way down here.
Mm-hmm.
But But yes, he ran a good lab.
I understand that he was very supportive from other scientists that we've interviewed, a good man to work for.
Yes, and he
gave you what you needed.
Yes, and he supported the low temperature work, which led to the superconductivity work. Before it looked interesting, I mean, he had a certain faith that this could be useful, and supported it.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned some other names, Mark Benz, you've mentioned Paul Schwartz. What can you tell us about Paul Schwartz? Did you work with him in magnetic fields?
I first met Paul Schwartz when we were beginning to work on superconductivity in the early 60s. And he and I did a fair amount of joint research in those times, not on practical applications, yes, we did that too, but also in understanding just how these superconductors work. It was a new kind of superconductor, and there were a lot of things we didn't know about them, and we did real scientific work there. Then there was superconducting magnets. Paul Schwartz has a degree in physics, but he's moved in many different directions through his career.
Like yourself.
Yeah, yes, but he actually has gone out of GE and done these things. He ran a computer software company for a while in this area. Then he's worked for the state government in helping small businesses get set up and run in a financially reliable way. And now he and I are involved together and worrying about energy and the United States and the world.
Well, so you still communicate and meet on a professional level with many of these people that you work with today?
Well, I was talking to Paul Schwartz this morning on the phone.
Great.
So independent of this altogether.
That's great. Well, you know, we've been visiting with Dr. Howard Hart, PhD, who worked at R&D for 35 years or better at the GE Global Research Company. We will take a short break, and we're going to come back with Howard Hart, and we're going to talk a little bit more about his experiences in his career. So we'll be right back after this break. We're back from our break, and we're with Howard Hart, PhD, talking about his professional career and life's work. He's told us some very interesting stories. Howard, you told me about a group that developed a method or technology that was ultimately sold to Bell Labs. Was that the?
No, this is.
How did that work?
What was the
Bell Labs story that we were talking about earlier?
Bell Labs had made the original discovery that a certain material, niobium-10, was still superconducting at very high fields, magnetic fields, and this made it potentially possible to make a magnet that you could use in your research. And Roland Schmidt took an order from Bell Labs for a 100,000 Gauss magnet that would have big enough to do experiments in. And we worked very hard, and with many problems came up along the way, including these magnetic instabilities called flux jumps, which we had to work hard to work our way around, and that's what I was working on. Ultimately, we did, 6 months late, deliver to Bell Labs this 100 kilogauss magnet, the first commercial 100 kilogauss magnet that had been sold.
So that was the first sale in the world?
Of a magnet
of that magnitude.
Yes,
yeah.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
It was a money-losing sale.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. It took us a long time and a lot of work to do it.
The resulting work on the MRI, I mean, the superconductivity work and magnetic technology, could you expand on that a little bit more about the MRI and its application, the size of the magnets? You told me that earlier that these smaller magnets...
Yeah, these original magnets that we were making were, you could put something maybe the size of your fist in them and do an experiment. They were very good for physics experiments. They were not good from a biological point of view. Some years later, and with different materials actually, people began to develop as neat as they found magnets big enough to put humans in. And this was several decades later, actually. And you could get higher magnetic fields with those big superconducting magnets, and you could get better signals out of the magnetic resonance, so that you could begin to look with fairly high resolution at the human body. And originally, we were quite happy. We physicists who were working on this quite naively thought, well, we will be able to look in the body so we won't have to do as much exploratory surgery. You know, that was what we were going to do. It has moved in different ways now, partly because of legal liabilities, that doctors are often having people get MRIs in order, not because they really need it so much, but to protect the doctor down the road.
That they didn't miss some diagnosis or something.
Yes. And so it has grown into a very large business.
Worldwide?
Worldwide. GE is one of the big people in that field.
Yes. There's an open MRI and a closed one. Is that just technology, or is that just two different methods?
Okay,
and are the magnets any different in a closed and an open
very
MRI?
Different, very different. GE now sells both kinds. These magnets that I was talking about, the superconducting magnets, are big tubes. And actually, my view of this is they give the best pictures. They're the highest field. However, there's some people, and I ran into this myself when I was working on this, there's some people who simply would not go into those tubes. They're claustrophobic. So another thing you can do, you can now use permanent magnets. We've gotten better and better permanent magnets over the years. So you can build not a tube, but two flat plates, if you wish, and you can lie between them and you can see out to the sides. So they're not as claustrophobic. They do not have as high a magnetic field, but for many uses, they're perfectly good. And so nowadays, the open MRI is one that you can see out of.
Yes, well, it's probably better for children or, as you say, people with claustrophobia. Or,
yes. Actually, what's sort of interesting, the fellow, Dr. Reddington, who was head of our group who worked on MRI.
Red Reddington.
Red Reddington.
Yeah, tell us about him.
Well, I'll tell you this first. He could not get in one.
Because?
Claustrophobia.
Oh, really?
Right.
Wow.
So
one of the researchers on the
project,
in the field.
I mean, he was a human being, and
of course,
something like 1 in 20 or something like that, people really cannot get in such a tube.
Yes.
So we mentioned Red Reddington, and he's another one of the outstanding people I worked with as a manager, actually, because long before I worked for him, he was involved in GE's X-ray CT. And he made some decisions that were very important in getting GE way ahead in that field, and of course, much better for the humans who were. Before I worked for him, he was involved in GE's X-ray CT. And he made some decisions that were very important in getting GE way ahead in that field, and of course, much better for the humans who are going to have to undergo CT. So then, with that success under his belt, when the MRI work started, he was head of that group, and he made it possible. He protected us from the people we needed to be protected from in the company, and he supported us in the ways that we needed to be supported, and we had a very good group. Their names I could mention.
Well, you should if you'd like to, yeah.
Well, I would mention William Edelstein and Paul Bottomley, both of whom now are at Johns Hopkins Medical School. John Schenck, who's he's an RPI PhD in physics, studied superconductivity, but he also is an MD. And he is still active in GE. He's not retired. He's also he's co-head of a group that studies Alzheimer's disease using MRI over at Albany Med. He's the GE representative in that group. Dr. Zimmerman is the Albany Med man. So, and then a fellow named Scott Smith, who moved from MRI into ultrasound, is still active.
Well, you work with some very outstanding
These are very good people.